it's given different names. Different countries will, some call it Kuttab, some call it Quranic schools, some call it Maktab, some call it even Madrasa. So the institute that we're talking about is the very elementary, the very basic level of education that is offered to our children. Islamic education, the ability to read Quran, the ability to learn basic du'as, basic morals, basic values, and basic Islamic teachings. That institute is what we're talking about here. Alhamdulillah, it is something that has always been around in the Muslim world. And within the UK, it was established as soon as our elders came to this country. Obviously then, the maktabs or the makatib, the institutes, were not as organized, were not the most efficient, most proficient, and the level of education is not what it is today. There's reasons for that. I basically looked into it as my research project on Maktab and the evolution of Maktab since the beginning of Maktab in this country, when our elders came to this country, and right now the level of education and the evolution that it's had, the changes, the dynamics have changed, the motivations of people, the people who are involved, all that, the whole dynamic of Maktab has changed. When they came to this country, the reason they set up Maktab was so that they can learn Quran. Secondly, a lot of maktabs, a lot of those supplementary schools as they were known, or out of school educational establishments, one of the reasons they were set up was so that kids and children could learn their forefathers' cultural background. So where they were from, their culture, their heritage, and also their language. So along with Islam, they were very focused on culture, teaching their children their culture. They were very focused on teaching their home mother's tongue as well, language. So as you can see, it was a mixture of things that they were focused on. A bit of Quranic reading, a bit of very basic Islamic education, language, and also their culture. So because their focus was very fixed, they weren't too focused on Islamic education as a whole, their spiritual nurture, the intellectual growth, the total Islamic education, a lot of things were missed out. But as ulama got involved, as people got more educated in these the UK madrasas and seminaries, obviously the shift started to happen. Ulama were coming out who were more educated, who knew their language, who saw Maktab as a very solid basis and platform to spread Islam and teach our children the basics in a more robust and more structured form. So the first change that happened was that the language changed. So rather than teaching in their mother's tongue, which was one of the elders' focus anyway, they wanted to preserve their mother's tongue. But now, when the modern graduate came out, who was graduated from this country, they were teaching in the English language. So therefore, that was the first shift. The second shift was, even the Quran, which were being taught, were not being taught in the most precise manner. The Qurans were being taught, but tajweed as we know it wasn't there. So that changed. There was a lot of focus that if we're going to teach Quran, we want to make sure our children are learning Quran as well as possible. We want to teach them Quran as well as the Arabs. So that was the second focus, that a lot of people concentrated, that we're going to teach them Quran, where a lot of our time is going. So therefore, we're going to make sure our children are learning Quran properly with tajweed, efficiency, etc. The third shift that happened was in terms of resources. So where people were teaching a lot of Islamic stuff, but off memory, they started to pick out resources in the English language. The very earliest resources available was Ta'limul Haq, Ta'limul Islam, etc., which are very basic. The languages are not most suited for children's education. However, that was an English resource which was being utilized quite heavily. And then slowly, other resources started to come up. We had the Tasheel series, which was basically Ta'limul Haq, but summarized into smaller books. It was organized in levels, and other supplementary books were introduced with Ta'limul Haq. For example, Tasheelul Akhlaq, which taught manners, Tasheelul Hadith, which taught Ahadith, Tasheelul Sira, Tasheelul Ways. So basically, a full series of books were introduced, focusing on different aspects of our children's education. So alhamdulillah, that was good. That was the first revolutionary syllabus where people could really engage with the children. They had ready-made resources which was structured. They had ready-made resources which had different subject areas, and then people could work their maktabs, develop the maktabs around that syllabus. So they could have yearly progression, they could have different subjects taught, so that children could have different interest levels and children could enjoy it. So Tasheel series not only introduced a structured learning material, different subjects, different levels, they also had activities incorporated. So they could learn and then have activities on their subject that they were covering. So it was very groundbreaking because it wasn't something that was available. So alhamdulillah, a lot of makatib took that on and they structured their maktabs around that. So if the Tasheel series was introduced over 5 years, they would set their maktab up in 5 years. If you had about 6-7 subjects, they would introduce all subjects, and whatever activities they had, they would incorporate that. So maktabs were booming in that sense. But as with one resource and one syllabus, there was always going to be some shortcoming. So alhamdulillah, then we had few other resource providers, Safar, Nasiha, and few others, which developed their own resources, taking into account the various subjects that Islam covers, taking into account the various levels that kids are at maktab from the age of 5 to the age of 14, 16, whatever. So they incorporated a syllabus which had something for 5-year-old up to 16-year-olds. They had all these subjects covering aqaid, belief system, fiqh, basic rituals, ahadith, sira, etc., akhlaq, manners, and so they incorporate different subjects. And they had modern activities. They had activities for children which very similarly resembled their activities at school, and they had reward schemes, etc. So that was the second, the most revolutionary aspect, that you had ready-made resources which was 21st century. So again, people then upped their makatib, the performance of makatib increased, the level of engagement with children increased because the resources were tailor-made to engage children. The languages were something that children were used to. The levels were organized so that you could give relevant age-based resources so that kids could do work and activities based on their age. So that was the second. But then obviously we still needed the makatib to engage their teachers. We couldn't just rely on teachers working off this syllabus. So we have so many teachers across the country who are developing their own resources so that they can further engage their own children based on their own, resources that they're developing. And this is something that we have done in our own maktab, where we utilize the ready-made resources like Safar, whatever resource they have, the syllabus that they have, we use that. But then we have 2 days of our own resource. So where we have thematic learning, we'll take a theme and we'll create our own resource so that the teacher can engage himself. So if the teacher is developing a resource himself, that is the most, direct involvement he can have with the resource and the children. So our model is that we use 2 days, we use the ready-made resource like Safar, and 2 days we have thematic learning where the teacher, we've got a plethora of resources. Alhamdulillah, we've got a lot of resources that we've developed over the years, and we use that and we teach it as a thematic form. So we'll take a theme, Hajj for instance, during the time of Hajj, we'll dedicate 1 week, 2 weeks, or sometimes even more, and we'll engage the students with our own resource, and we'll teach them, just on that theme for a few weeks. And then obviously Safar is happening in its own time. So whatever Safar is covering, it could be anything. It won't be themed. It won't be according to the season of whatever it is. So on our thematic learning, whatever the theme is, whatever the time of the year it is, whatever subject needs to be covered, in our thematic learning we can cover it. So if Ramadan comes, we will introduce Ramadan through our thematic learning. And if it's Qurbani time, we'll introduce the subject of Qurbani, etc., etc. So this is basically the very brief summary. Along with the resources, the Maktab's professional development was taking place in terms of making sure that everything is on record, attendances, rewards, everything, safety, health and safety, even those measures had increased from the earliest times. So where at the beginning these things were not really taken care of, now we have institutes which are resembling, primary schools, in that everything, policies in terms of management, behavior, fees, everything is there. Health and safety, all these things that are necessary are there. So it's a robust institute as a whole now, alhamdulillah. So education wise, it's there in terms of catering for the wider education. In terms of the professional background, everything being managed well, everything being communicated well, everything being recorded. Even there's books for recording incidents, for instance. Health and safety, everything's taken care of. And the third thing that I would say, which is really has taken Maktab to another level, is extracurricular engagement. So extracurricular engagement is where children in a Maktab setting are engaged in activities so that their social and emotional care is taken care of. So they're not only intellectually educated, they are also emotionally educated. So there'll be campaigns where children will work with, which will nurture some relevant values. So for example, 2-3 campaigns that I've been involved in. One is a food drive campaign. So what that food drive campaign does is children will collect non-perishable foods. You will talk to the children about the importance of supporting your neighbor, looking after the poor, looking after the needy, etc. So here you'll have a full lesson around it. And then basically you'll give them a campaign, a 2-week challenge, where you collect as much non-perishable food as possible, and then you will go and give that to a relevant charity or a food bank, etc. So that's an extracurricular activity geared towards engaging and giving children the emotional education. So not only theoretically are you teaching them about care and looking after the needy, you're also giving them an active opportunity to do something about it. So therefore it nurtures them as well in that value. So this is the third step that Makatib are taking, where they're engaging students in extracurricular activities, so which gives children the most the strongest possibility and chance of developing that emotional quality that Makatib are seeking to inculcate in their children. So alhamdulillah, now Maktabs are achieving their full potential. There can always be more, but alhamdulillah, they've taken into account a lot of things, which has made our Makatib a very robust institute. And alhamdulillah, we hope this continues, and whatever shortcomings there are, that's obviously something else. But in terms of the full range of involvement in a Maktab, where education, intellectual education is there. In terms of emotional care, emotional education is there. Extracurricular activities are there. The financially robust, as well as in terms of policies and everything is there. I think it's a very good position our Makatib are in. I think parental involvement is it's a very important thing, for us to get the best out of children. We can give them intellectual education where we teach them facts. Kids can learn that, kids can retain that. You don't need much of parents' involvement in that. But one of the key focus areas of a maktab is nurture. They want to inculcate values of care, values of mercy, values of the various values that are taught, patience, forgiveness, understanding. And these are values that we want to teach our children. But the problem with these is the assessments are not easy, and you can't just teach it and expect children to absorb and bring these qualities. These are lifelong processes. But we want to introduce our children, so Makatib introduce them. So when it comes to the intellectual learning, sometimes you need parents' involvement, and it's always good to have parents' involvement. But it is the moral care, when you're trying to offer moral care, moral education, that you need the utmost, participation from parents. So when it comes to parents' involvement, from my experience, they're not that involved. They want to be, maybe, it's just they don't know how to. The first level of engagement is that the fact that they choose to send their children to Maktab, that is their first level of, commitment. And that's a big commitment. To drop them off, to pick them up, come what may, 5 times a day, 5 times a week. It is a big commitment. So for them to take that on, consciously, that we are going to do this for our children, that's a level of commitment which I commend them for. The second level of commitment and participation, which is where they actively engage with the teacher in terms of seeking their progress. If teachers give them feedback, they follow that feedback up. If they've got a diary, they follow that diary up. If they've got homework, parents, support them in their homework. That level of engagement, it depends on how a madrasa or maktab is set up. If a maktab is not set up to engage the parents in such a nature, then you can't really put the shift of blame on them. Now, I know a lot of makatib, who don't have that mechanism of engagement, meaning they don't have a way of engaging the parents. They don't have a diary that a child will take home. They don't give them enough homework for them to do at home. So if the maktab is not delivering in that style, so the level of engagement from a parent becomes reduced. Their level then becomes making sure that they're attending regularly, making sure that if there's a parents' evening, they attend that, and making sure if they do get some work, then make them do that. So it depends how maktabs engage the parents. Now, if the maktab doesn't engage the parents, it doesn't have these systems in place, then obviously you can't blame the parents. Then the third system is where a maktab is designed in a way that try to get maximum participation and maximum involvement from the parents. So these makatib, what they do, they will have regular homeworks. So even though they can probably get a lot of work done at madrasa, they will deliberately send some work home so that parents can get engaged with them. They will have a diary where parents are expected to follow their children's progress and sign it and monitor it, etc. And the teacher will give feedback in that, and they'll expect parents to give their feedback there as well. Similarly, they'll have more than one parents' evening where they'll expect the children to come in. They'll have those extracurricular activities where parents will be asked to engage and participate and support. So when a maktab is set up like that, where they're seeking engagement, this is where you can really see what level a parent wants to engage in. From my experience, I don't find when it goes to that level, parents don't engage that much because it becomes quite, demanding for them. And the second reason it becomes quite demanding is that what you're expecting from them, sometimes it's not always clear. So even in a school, a lot of the times that the level of engagement they want from the parents, they don't get, simply because parents are not informed well enough about their role at home. What does the school want me? So the school will give a small slip that your child is expected to do these and you support them in that. In a maktab setting, it's probably not like that. So whatever little homework they get, they'll probably be asked parents, to support them. So the level of engagement that makatib are seeking is probably not enough from the madrasa side. They're not seeking enough engagement. And if they are, they're probably not educating them about that role. So like in schools, they'll have courses, how to teach maths, how to teach English at home. So this is what I find where parents don't engage is sometimes they don't know how to engage. And the things area that you're asking their engagement for, sometimes they're not educated well enough in that aspect, so which makes them a bit reluctant to engage. But on a mid-level engagement, I reckon parents to engage if they are, English speaking, if they've been to a school system, so they can recognize what's being achieved and what is the intention of the madrasa, they do engage. But obviously you can't demand too much from them because you've got to understand the maktab and at home balance as well. So I reckon my honest appraisal of the situation is that on a moderate level there is engagement. If you can engage them properly by educating about their role, what you're expecting from them, if you can engage them, educate them well enough, you can then engage them. And obviously it's only going to happen if parents are brought up in this country or have had an upbringing in this country and they understand the education system, where parents play a vital role. Even though a lot of things can be done at madrasa, when children are asked to do certain work at home, parents can recognize that and do that, then obviously the engagement becomes more stronger. And the parents who have been to the system here, through the system here, they're able to appreciate that and they're able to contribute to that engagement as well. So moderate level engagement, that is, if you want them to be highly active, then obviously you've got to develop your system first, the way you engage, and then educate them well enough for them to be able to confidently engage as well. So I don't think at the higher level of engagement we're there, because the two-way operation is not there in place at the moment. Things have changed. Right at the beginning, the focus was Quran. My very first teaching was in 1996. So a lot has changed, and I as a student can relate as well. So when I went to some form of maktab, what my parents' intention were, what my the colleagues, the students that went with me, what their parents. So right at the beginning, the intention was quite focused. So they're going to go and they're going to learn how to read the Quran, and they're going to do a khatam. They're going to finish a completion of the Quran, and they're going to memorize some du'as and learn how to pray namaz. So the very basic, nothing too fancy and nothing too elaborate. So that was always there at the beginning, and this still is one of the reasons why parents send, so that children will go to mosque, they'll learn how to read the Quran and do a complete reading of the Quran, a khatam. They'll learn basics of namaz, etc. and very few du'as, the daily du'as, which are tangible and visible, that children can read, and parents can monitor as well. So at the time of sleeping, read the dua; at the time of eating, read the. So that's the very basic what parents were seeking then, and a lot of parents are still seeking that. Then there are those parents who are slightly more clued up. They know what's being offered in our maktabs, so therefore they're expecting more. So they know the teachers, they're expecting English speaking teachers, they're expecting emotional care, that children go there, they feel safe, etc. At the same time, they're expecting a wide range of subjects to be taught along with Quran. So these parents are asking for more because more is actually being offered. So even for those parents who are just asking for Quran, but that's not what's going to be offered, because Makatib have moved on, they're going to be offering more. But as a parent, because they're not fully clued up of what level Makatib are at, they're just expecting the very basic. So the second level, like I said, who are more clued up on how Makatib are being run, they're expecting more. The third group of parents, I would say, are those who understand the system quite well. They understand what is being achieved, what are the intentions of Makatib, how Makatibs are, delivering, what they're delivering, and how to get the best out for their children. So they're sent, they will pick out those Makatib who can fully deliver their objectives, which is making sure that their children get good Quranic education, where they're able to read Quran proficiently, like professionally, where they're able to, learn different subjects, covering a wide range, so that their children will have a wide base of Islamic education, a firm grounding, where children are given moral care, where children are safe, and where also there's extracurricular activities, so that their children will get the best outcome, best possible results from their maktab. So they're seeking out those. Although small in number, but there are parents who are, fully clued up about the offerings of maktab, and they're seeking out the best opportunities for their children. So the reasons are multiple. From the very basic level, where parents are just sending, I would say, about 20 to 30% just for Quran and basic Islamic education. There are those who are wanting more, selecting, and then there are those who are looking out for everything, making sure that the system is a robust system, health and safety and everything is there, the teaching is top quality, the resources are there, there's extracurricular activities. So some parents are really clued up, and they're trying to maximize the output from their maktab. Character development is a very important issue. The responsibility primarily lies with parents, because it's not a topic to be taught. Character development is a lifelong process. So you've got to engage them, you've got to be a role model to them, you've got to, introduce certain ideas to them, and all these cannot take place in the confined setting of a maktab. Maktab can introduce it as a subject. Maktab can introduce certain extracurricular activities to support that, but on a lifelong basis of helping children develop those characteristics, it is the role of parents. So for example, in my maktab, what we do is we introduce these subjects. So one subject is what we call values, Islamic values. So on an educational level, I'll explain what's a value, the importance of value, the negatives of not having these values, and the positive effect on the individual, the family, the society of having these value systems in place. So I can introduce it as a subject, I can engage them, but in terms of giving them, avenues of developing those qualities and values, we can't do much in a maktab setting. So I can introduce, it then becomes the active role of maktab to utilize extracurricular activities and the maktab setting as much as we can, but then parents have to take that role at home as well. So as an introducer, we can introduce these character development, subjects and courses, but parents will ultimately play the bigger hand in making sure or helping their children trying to develop it. So the role is parents. But the second problem is in terms of education, parents, I'm also a parent. Parenting is a difficult issue in terms of understanding how to parent, in terms of understanding children's development. It's a difficult subject. So the role is primarily parents, but it's a difficult one. As a maktab, you can introduce these value systems, what values are, characteristics, qualities, etc. And that should happen from a maktab. So at least children are exposed to the idea of these value systems, the benefits, etc. So if they can develop it themselves through the various campaigns that you introduce in your maktab, or at least the setting. So the children are going to be there for 2 hours. So when you teach them about morals, characters, and the value systems, if you can then monitor and support them in developing in the maktab setting, alhamdulillah. But the chances of inculcating all these values in that short period of time is quite difficult. So you've done your part in terms of introducing, supporting those value systems in the maktab time, and then engaging the parents however you can. It will then be the role of parents to make sure that they take it forward, they take it on board, and they take it forward. So whatever is being taught, they then monitor it, they then support it through their own campaigns, through their own model systems, through their own reward and schemes, etc. So if they can then take it forward, then inshallah we can have positive effect. But character building, it's not just an intellectual subject, it's a moral subject, moral education, which takes many years for it to bear fruit. So yes, primarily the role lies with parents, but the makatib can act as introducers, and whatever their setting allows them, they should be able to do, should be able to monitor and support the character development in that setting, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, we're very fortunate in the UK that we have a wide range of educational facilities. So we have the madrasa, where a person can study complete Islamic studies at a scholarly level. So alhamdulillah, that's a very, very fortunate position to be in. There are some countries which don't have that. They're having to send them abroad. But we have, in our own localities, where the full education system is in place, where a person can study from A to Z and become a qualified scholar. So that's the madrasas, the seminaries. We also have Islamic secondary schools, Islamic primary schools, and our maktab systems. Amongst all that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I feel that maktab is the most important. It is the most important institute, and it is the one that has the maximum capacity to educate, to develop the children of the next generation. And the reason I feel that is because certain things are in support of maktab, certain things are in favor of maktab taking that leading position. So first of all, makatib are smaller institutes. For you to deliver a maktab, you don't need a massive site. For you to develop a madrasa, you need a massive site. You need somewhere where, a big capacity, 200 people can come, stay, etc. Various class activities, So you don't need a massive site. Where you have 2 rooms, you can start a maktab there. So in terms of space, it's got a very small requirements. The second reason is that it's more affordable. So a maktab would probably in a year charge between £200 to £500, different places. So it's affordable. So therefore, education at that level becomes accessible to parents. The third reason is that because maktabs are a smaller setting, it's more scattered. So wherever you are, within walking distance, you'll have a maktab. So therefore, it's easy for you to take your children there. So it's more accessible in terms of location, etc. The fourth reason is parents have already got a strong sense of the importance. Now, whether parents are educated Islamically or they're not, whether parents are practicing or not, whether parents are inclined towards Islamic scholarship or not, they feel the importance of sending their children to a maktab. So that importance within parents' mind and hearts, we didn't need to do anything. We don't need to convince parents. We don't need to work on parents to change their mind to send them. That's already there. So that plays a big part. So you don't need to go around convincing. In my opinion, I would say, probably 90% of children go through the maktab system simply because parents are willing to send them. The fifth reason is that you're working with children who are, impressionable. You're working at an age where you can make, good progress on their education. You can introduce valuable, Islamic ideas. You can introduce valuable Islamic topics. You can introduce, character building, aspects from a very young age. You can, tell them about the harms and, the dangers of certain, negativities which they might face later on. So it's a very prime age for introducing certain things to them as well. So on that whole, I call it the maktab is a mass education. You've got access to 90% of parents because they're willing to send. It's easy to set up. It's widely available. It's also a very prime age for you to have an impression on children. And if you can develop good education where you're taking care of children's intellectual and emotional needs and care, you can have a very, very profound effect on children. So therefore, in my opinion, if there's any institute that we should be focusing our attention on to make sure that it's delivering, make sure that it's maximizing its potential, maximizing its outreach, maximizing what it can achieve, it is maktab. Because a lot of things fall into place in support of maktab. And if we can work on our maktab, then inshallah we can have the maximum positive effect on our society through this institute, inshallah.
What are the positive effects of having a maktab?
So the positive effect is, first of all, rather than children not being exposed to Islamic education, maktab is exposing them. Maktab is introducing a lot of Islamic education to them. So if makatib weren't available, you can probably then say 90% of our children will not have access to any Islamic education.
What will happen then?
I don't know what the negatives would be, but what I can safely say is you're not going to have, the level of Islamic, identity education that you have today in children. You're probably not going to have that. So at least makatib are there. They're introducing Islamic ideas, Islamic teachings, Islamic moral characters, etc. So therefore, you're giving yourself the best chance of helping and nurturing the next generation of children. So we can't guarantee success, we can't guarantee a positive impact, but what we can do is make sure that you're in the right place, doing the right thing, so that you're giving yourself the best chance of having a positive impact on the next generation of students. I think if we want our makatibs to do well, we have to take children's perspectives on board as well. And that is something that we do at our maktab. Even in our thematic learning, we try to engage the child. If the child is involved in the decision making, meaning what they should be learning, what interests them, what excites them, then you've got a very good chance of engaging and teaching them because you've already piqued their interest. So if we want our makatib to do well, we need to understand from a child's perspective if our makatib are children friendly. If a child were to speak his mind, would he want to come to our maktab? So I think we need to understand where our makatib are. 30 years ago, maktab is not a place that children wanted to go to. It was something that parents forced it upon them. It was something The reason being is there wasn't good education there. There wasn't engaging education there. There wasn't a wide range of topics to be covered, and predominantly the learning was rote learning, memorizing. So you would just memorize. There wouldn't be intellectual engagement. And obviously, even that, if you do it properly, rote learning, memorizing, if you do it properly, where it's made clear the benefits of it, where they can see progression, what that rote learning leads to, if you can engage them with rote learning, children can even utilize that and succeed through that. But like I said, in the olden days, the medium of exchange was poor. I mean, the language of teaching was not something that kids could relate to. So that was one barrier. The second reason was it was predominantly rote learning, which wasn't even delivered efficiently in a nice way, engaging way. And the third reason was that it wasn't the safest of places. It wasn't some place that you could go and feel emotionally catered for. It was something that was challenging. There were beatings there. There were verbal abuse, etc. So it wasn't a place that was welcoming. So the language wasn't what you wanted. The model of learning wasn't what you wanted because it was rote learning. The availability of wider subjects weren't available, so it was just focused on very elementary one or two topics. And the fourth thing was the emotional care was not there. So you didn't feel safe there. You didn't feel welcome there. You didn't feel that you were taken care of emotionally. So as a result of that, it wasn't a place that children wanted to go. Things have moved on. Now, alhamdulillah, you have institutes which have robust policies in place that children are going to be taken care of. It's a safe place. It's a warm place. Parents, children. So the communication issue, which was an off-putting thing, meaning if you didn't understand, if the language wasn't something that you were comfortable with, your level of engagement and learning drops. Now, that's not an excuse and barrier anymore. Most of the places would disseminate and teach in the English medium. The second issue back then was rote learning. Nowadays, there is still memorization, but it's a small part of their overall education. So it fits in quite nicely. You don't eliminate rote learning because rote learning, memorization is a crucial part of our Islamic learning. The third thing was there's a wider range of topics. So because there's a wider range of topics, there's more engagement. So you have this subject, that subject, and well-developed resources. So again, there's a wide range of subjects which is quite pleasing. Then those resources are well-developed, suitable to different age categories along with various activities. So it's very engaging. And the last thing is about emotional care. So children are getting that emotional care where they are made to feel welcome. Each child is supported to achieve his or her potential. So that which wasn't there. So all these four issues that were prevalent in the olden days have been taken care of. So therefore it's a much healthier place for children to be in. So alhamdulillah, I do see it. There's been a massive change in terms of children's interest. Nowadays, children are themselves interested in coming. I can't speak for everyone, but like I said, what the challenges then were have been taken care of. So therefore, there's very little reason for children not to want to come. But from my own personal inexperience, I know children are really keen to come because it's a nice place to be. It's education that's challenging. It's education that's stimulating. It's something that gets the best out of them, gives them the chance to compete, gives them the chance to learn something new, develop themselves. So mosques are providing those opportunities, and kids are relishing that opportunity, alhamdulillah. It's a good question. Whether the language difference, the language barrier. I won't say it's a language barrier, first of all. In 30 years ago, our mother's tongue was not a barrier because children were proficient in that. they could communicate, they could speak, they could understand. So it wasn't a problem then. Problems started to happen where children were not as proficient in their mother's tongue, which is the current generation. They're not able to speak Bangla too well, they're not able to understand Bangla too well, they're not able to understand Urdu too well, Punjabi, etc. So therefore for them, the language, it becomes quite difficult. So if you communicate to them in Bangla, they're not able to grasp a lot of things. For us, 30 years ago, language in Bangla, whatever was taught, you could understand that as long as it was explained well enough. So yes, probably English would have been better, but it wasn't such a loss because we could understand, and if the teacher was good enough to be able to break it down and explain it, then that language barrier could be overcome, which is not a thing. Right now, it's a more difficult situation because children don't understand their mother's tongue as well. Bangla, Urdu, Punjabi, etc. They don't understand it well. So therefore, you need to make sure that the communication is happening in a language that they're very comfortable with and they're able to maximize their education and learning. So that's the difference.